So what is happening in your buyer that they say is worth it? What gives it meaning? Because it has to be their emotions first that lead before the practical, real nuts and bolts get caught up to the movement.
You're listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 431. And today I've got a special guest joining us to talk about how to rev up your client growth engine. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and ripple-making business owners. It's your host, Melanie Benson. And today I'm super excited about this topic because I think right now we all would like to be able to turn the notch up on our client growth engine. And my friend that's coming to join us today is profoundly powerful at this. And she's got her own approach. I've got my own approach. And one of the things that I believe is so powerful in this is learning how to borrow the right audiences, what I call borrow $1 million visibility with your powerful signature framework. And getting your message in front of the right audiences at the right time can be a very powerful part of getting your client growth engine stoked, because you're going to start seeing those people raising their hand and going, hey, yeah, I'm interested. How do I work with you? So if you do not yet have my framework, my 7-step framework to get your message in front of $1 million audiences, then head right now to melaniebenson.com/framework. You can download it totally free. And you're going to want to look through the framework and really self-assess which areas are strong, which areas are not, and what am I going to do about this right now so that I'm relevant and I've got my message in front of the right audiences. Go get it at melaniebenson.com/framework. And now let's get into today's episode. Welcome back, amplifiers. Today we're talking about the non-negotiables necessary to ignite your client growth engine. And I have an amazing expert joining us today. Let me introduce you to Campbell Rapin. Now, she is an energetic, tell it like it is business advisor, mentor, consultant, speaker, and 3 times international best-selling author. She's supported over 400 companies to create a combined revenue of more than 1 billion, and believes that business growth can be elegantly simple when you focus on the 3 non-negotiable business foundations that build a client growth engine. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm really psyched to have this conversation with you.
I am too. It's going to be fun. Right into the
Yeah.
deep end.
Right? Might as well. And I love this idea that growth can be simple. I think for a lot of people, that's a permission slip they need, right? It's like, oh, I can keep it simple. Yay.
We often really get caught into buying into the complexity story. And trust me, somebody's willing to sell it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe it for a second. Simple is what scales, simple is what is understood. And I even saw a great tip recently, which is if you're creating any story that's shared out loud, shared in writing, you really need to check whether it lands in its simplicity at a level 5 education, because truthfully, we're so distracted that simple is what we can connect to. And if you focus on the simple things and do them really well, you will always create big ripples. Always.
Mm. Yeah, love that. Well, one of the things that you and I've talked about before, and I think this would be a good place to start, is this idea of what predicts revenue. Like how do we know we can bring revenue in? What do we need to have in place so that revenue can flow? I don't know about you, but I'm hearing a lot of people this year was tough. Was not the revenue client waterfall that we hope for. And I think you can kind of shed some light on what we need to be focusing on right now.
It is true that for some, it has been an enormously challenging year. I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this as a brag. It's not everybody's storyline. And it wasn't mine personally. And it comes down to there are two things that I believe predict your revenue in the next 90 days. And across industries, across the globe, across service and product, on average, it takes 90 days to move from first contact to a yes. So I always look at what goes into the inputs that drives the outputs. And two things are truth tellers in every economy. Number one is you have to understand that your business is built on strangers. And so it is really important that we get in front of more people, more ways, more often. And in that exercise, it's not just about visibility. It is about finding the buyer in the room. And so when I hear, and I have heard the same storyline, that this year has been harder, and I said, you're running in the same circles is part of the problem when there are other buyers who were very happily shopping this year. You just weren't intersecting with them in your ecosystem, which is a solvable problem. So for me, the first thing I always track is how many people am I meeting and how many people am I identifying that I can say have a high probability of being a buyer, and a buyer is a very specific thing, and happy to show you what I think those are. But the first thing is that truth is that you must fuel with an expanding circle, and that is essential. The second piece of the puzzle is that money only moves hands when you make offers. And there has been a real shift of what is an offer. 3 or 4 years ago in the pandemic, it was, I posted on social media and that was an offer. Well, that's awareness. That's not an offer. And an offer can be as straightforward as, this is my program, this is the investment, MasterCard or Visa, but it can also be an invitation to move. And I would rather focus on movement and keep an offer happening in every touch point, because they compound over those 90 days. And so when I see people question, like, how do I know if I'm in a good, healthy place in my business? I said, track those two things. Because truthfully, every time my business has not been rocking well, it comes down to the first piece where I have not been expanding my circle, or truthfully, I think I'm making more offers than I really am. And in this economy and in this complexity of the market, simple things like, are you making phone calls, blows up most of my clients. I'm like, well, you can stand out in a marketplace by simply picking up the phone and making that offer, making that invitation, making that human to human connection voice. And they're like, can I send an email? I'm like, yes, it's lower. It doesn't have as much direct influence on it, but yeah, I'm going to suggest though, we maybe phone and talk to somebody. And it can be as simple as that. But those two things will predict your revenue. So right now in your business, if you're not celebrating new clients predictably, I would say look in the rearview mirror. What were you doing 90 days ago? Because it always germinates. In everybody's business, there's a germination period between exploration and a yes, exploration and a decision. And you have to cultivate that intentionally to have predictable success.
I need sound effects on the podcast. It's like I want to have like this boom sound or like the mic drop sound effect, because I think you just nailed two really big, often overlooked or maybe self-sabotage components. People just put those on perpetual pause. And you're right. Like, I don't know if it's they get so busy or if it's like too obvious, but if you're not doing those two things, you're definitely not going to be in a place to bring the cash flow in. So I'm so glad we started with those.
Well, and I think the biggest lie we tell ourselves is we're making more offers than we are.
Mhm.
And it's one that only when you have the courage to really look inside the true numbers, and the numbers never lie, it's telling. And I know one of the biggest things I hear consistently with everybody who starts in my business as a client, because the first 90 days we really sprint. Why 90 days? Because we need to start getting ROI for the dollars, time, and commitment we've invested. And the number one thing they say every single time is, I've made more offers in 90 days than I made in the last 9 months.
Mhm.
And I said, how's your business now? It's like, well, I'm a lot clearer on my message. I'm a lot clearer who I'm looking for. I'm a lot more confident presenting it. And I said, all of those cast big ripples, stay the course. Because not everybody will say yes to your offer. But if you're not making any to start with, boy, we got a problem.
Yeah, and I will just admit, like, I had been that person in the past that was terrified of what you just said, right? Like, call people? What? What do I say, right? And I know when we started to do reach out rather than waiting for people to come to us. Now we like to do a lot of that in the direct messaging part of the social media. We have actually had people move into sales that were completely disconnected and not interested at all. And so it works. And you do need to be intentional and you need to kind of get over your fear and create a system, which I know we're going to talk about today. So I just want to say, like, I am not immune to the stuckness that can come up around, like, oh my God, how do we do this? It's like, okay, we'll just, again, simplify. What's the one thing that's going to move the needle for you?
And you may never love making phone calls. Like that would be, you'd be an anomaly if you loved the phone calls, but you love what the phone calls bring. And that's when you have to lean into the, I get the result I want, and here's the price I pay to do it. And there's a big math equation. My coach took us through this at the start of the year and said, for every outbound call you make, whether they answer or not, it moves your business to this much cash. So if you want to create more cash and you want to find more clients, don't make this thing the hard thing, because there's plenty of other things that will be hard. Picking up the phone is simply a muscle. You say, I want the results, so I'm going to do it. And I do it first in the day so that it doesn't become someday.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually, the people who are meant to work with you, they're going to be so blown away that you called them.
All
It's
the
a
time.
bonding moment rather than a repelling moment. So just know there's a lot of wins there.
There are.
Let's talk about this idea of non-negotiables.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we talk ourselves out of doing the very things that are going to move the revenue needle. From your experience, what would you say are the three most important non-negotiables that as business owners we must be doing if we want to have this endless flow of new clients?
Yeah, and I say it's non-negotiable because it is the thing that is required in order to get what you want. You can't get what you want any other way. There's no shortcut. It's effort. The first thing is you have to know and be able to recognize and spot the pattern of what is going on in the moment for your next buyer, to see the pattern, to connect to the pattern, and to intentionally change the direction that they're experiencing. So you have to get clear on the what is happening. And to me, niching is a moment in time when a decision is being made. A decision to stay in a pattern that doesn't serve you, or a decision to change my inputs, to change my outputs. And I think the big challenge for most business owners is they're not clear enough on what decision is being made. And so it's really hard to find it. But that is the needle. You must get the pinhead nailed, because everything moves from there. So that's the first non-negotiable. You have to know what's happening and what is going on so you can recognize the pattern, so you can see it, spot it, and move towards it. Second component is you have to recognize that somebody's in a spin. So you have to directionally navigate the spin with them, which is strategy. You have to have a game plan to move somebody from curious to paid client. And the better you do that, the more predictably you do it, the more profitably you do it, the more frequently you do it, the less 3 a.m. nightmares you will have. This is a muscle. And I think a lot of people get confused that it's tactic, because that complexity is often about, I need another new tactic. And I'm saying not necessarily. Every tactic works, or you wouldn't have heard about it. It's not the tactic that will rescue you from a poorly planned roadmap. And so I tell people we have to have a strategy. Google has documented, and other analytical platforms have documented, that people take time to move. On average, there's a 0 moment of truth, 7 to 12 touch points before they're visible to you. And then once you're visible to you, they still have a lot of steps to get to before they're confident to get out a credit card. So you have to have a plan to slow down your confidence, your capability, and your language to move at the speed of which your next client is moving. Otherwise, you simply walk past each other like ships in the dark, and they hire somebody else. And that's what's happening in the marketplace right now. Money didn't stop moving hands. It's just not moving in your direction as much as it used to, because you're out of sync with something that's going on. And so I say non-negotiable number 2 is a marketing strategy to move somebody from curious to paid client and have a roadmap to do that and to know where people are going to get off track. How do you re-engage them? How do you keep them moving forward? And how do you check that spin that is still moving in maybe some unpredictable ways? The third non-negotiable is that an offer must be made. And an offer is really important in two things that I nail with my clients. Number one, value is created in the eye of the buyer. So what is happening in your buyer that they say is worth it? What gives it meaning? Because it has to be their emotions first that lead before the practical real nuts and bolts get caught up to the movement. Second piece of the offer is you must be clear what makes you the must hire so that you don't stay in the likable expert field where people say someday I'll hire you. And so for me, those three non-negotiables, every business on the planet needs. You need to know who you're looking for, you need to know how to move them, and you need to know what result is worth it so that they say yes to you specifically to help guide them to create it. You
So
can't pass
powerful.
go without these. That makes non-negotiable.
Okay. You just said something that just threw off all the radar buttons here. You mentioned this, like getting stuck in this likable expert area. Oh my gosh, I've seen so many people do this. So could we talk a little bit more about like what this likable expert versus must hired expert is, and how do we like get, if we are in that likable expert zone, we've been friend zoned, if you will, how do we get ourselves back into the must hired expert?
Yeah, the first thing I think about is, remember, I always think of buyers as in three lanes of traffic. And this is an analogy I use that you can help you know what lane you're in. Are you a likable expert or are you the most hired expert? Because it's proximity to decision making. The first thing is sometimes people are in the slow lane. And the slow lane is like, I know a bit about your programs. I'm probably an ideal candidate for it, but it's like in the distance. And you think if you just educate me, I will say yes. And they think that the answer is going to be a more compelling argument. And you're truthfully going to go hoarse, and I'm going to stop hearing you because it's not a proximity, because it's not a decision of today. And that's where you can get caught with thinking, well, my answer is just to educate in my content. Education is important, but truthfully, people don't pay for education because they could Google it. If all you're giving is knowledge, you will be replaced by Google or other AI or other kind of aggregate of sharing of knowledge. It's not what they need. The middle lane is somebody who's already in a moment of decision. So proximity is closer. And if you are the person who can disrupt the spin, and I mean kindly bump into it and change the direction of it and do one thing really well, spark curiosity that there is an alternate pattern that could be created, somebody will say, first off, what? I'm sorry, history does not prove you right. I'm in the same spin that I've created over and over and over again. And you're like, well, I have evidence. Would you be curious about what else is out there? If you spark curiosity and you do it well, they're like, okay, well, now tell me more. You're in a very strong position at that point to say, I will show you what it is, and I will tell you why it's hard to achieve on your own. And I get paid to create this result. Notice I planted a seed. I'm a hired resource for this. And if you keep moving, you might get to the place where someone says, I want that. And your response is, would you like me to make you an offer? Fast lane is somebody who's already got an awareness to a problem, probably already met you, maybe already received an offer from you, and they're in a spin. And in the moment, they're saying, please just hold my hand, I wobble. But I already know I need to hire you. The bigger question I face right now is I don't trust myself. So please hold my hand and help me be certain that I can borrow your confidence. And so when we talk about being a likable expert, sometimes it's the proximity to the decision. And what do they see or value as? Implementation as a hired resource, or somebody who will educate and never tell somebody, I'm in the business of solving this and I get paid for that result? Because both happen and both are really expensive consequences.
I love this so much. And I'm thinking as I'm listening to you about all of the people who spend so much time, like being the friend, right? And like I've heard that it also termed like you get friend zoned. It's like, well, they're gonna just give me advice because they're friend zone. I'm just curious, like if you are in this friendship dance, is there a way to break out of it? And maybe it really is a friend, and you're like, I know I could help them if I was the expert that they wanted to hire. Like, do you have like a little bit of advice to move out of that stuckness of I keep getting friend zoned?
Well, there's two things I would say. The first is when you are in a position where you haven't established that this is a business you run, that's the first piece of the puzzle. You need to be clear that you are a paid resource. And that's first a mindset game on your own. And
Yes.
secondly, it is a commitment to yourself to stop giving free advice. First off, that's part of it. Okay. You are creating the friend zone by contributing to it. And what I would typically transition around that is having a really frank conversation. I see the same pattern over and over and over again. And as a friend, I want you to know that pattern is uncomfortable to watch.
Yes.
Do you have any
Yes.
interest in breaking that pattern? Because as a friend, I can just watch you spin, but I am not here to intersect it. But I can tell you I could. And if you want to solve it, don't give away free advice for that. A good friend of mine put something in social media way back at the start of the year, and I loved it so much, talk about it a lot. Her name is Amanda. And she said, don't mistake knowledge as equal. Because you might come to my coffee shop and have coffee with me to pick my brain about knowledge. And you're going to do the same thing with Google, Pinterest, YouTube. Don't mistake my 27 years of implementing this knowledge as the equivalent of what you learned over a free cup of coffee or a Google search. If you really want the result, ask me to make you an offer. And when you go into that, you go into it with the expectation that truth is our non-negotiable. I tell my clients, I said, I am not here to be a twit with you. You are asking me to hold a standard until you feel like you could live it on your own. And I say, what's your big vision? Where do you want to go? What are your big goals? And then I put up the mirror as a mentor and say, you must do what's required to have that. In my expertise, this is what's required to achieve that. So what's incongruent? Either the goal you say you wanted, or we have to change the inputs. But when you are friend zoned, you're contributing it by constantly giving free advice. And my invitation is to ask that person first, do you want to solve this? Or is this just our favorite pastime of complaint and reviewing the pattern? And if so, you have to establish, I can help you solve it. Would you like me to make you a paid offer? And the moment you do that, people really truly value what they pay for.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Because knowledge isn't the problem. It's implementing and holding the line and your standard where things get a little dicier. And so then it always goes back as a good friend. Let me hold and remind you why you told me it was worth it. Because I believe in you, but I can't do the work for you. So do you want this? And would you like my help to achieve it? This is what clients pay me. And you do not need to be discounting to your friends and family. That's not required. Good friends pay full price for your services because they value them.
Yeah, I'm always a little tickled when somebody has like a common association with me and like, do I get a discount for that? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Your discount, it's fast access.
exactly.
Because I might flex my schedule because I care about you, and we might do this over different kind of hours of the day. Might have a glass of wine involved in it, but no, outside of that, you have faster access.
Exactly.
But the value is not cheapened or
Exactly.
discounted.
Well, I want to move on to one last piece here because I can imagine that someone's listening in and this is probably really resonating with our Amplify community. And if it is, we want to hear from you. Give us a little shout out, tag us in this episode wherever you share it and say, "Oh my gosh, this was like a big aha for me." But what I think could be really helpful for everybody is like, what are your go-to suggestions on where do I find that next buyer or that next client?
Well, the first thing I want you to do is to audit where you're spending time. Here's the challenge. Your most comfort zone exists in rooms with current clients, past clients, and other people who drank the same Kool-Aid as you in training, education, or how you got to build the business you have today. It's natural. I call that the room of enlightenment. Let me just give you a thing that might blow up your mind. That is not where you're going to find your next client. So if all you're doing is spending time in rooms where you're enlightened, let me tell you, your clients in the dark. Audit where you're spending your time and reduce the time if you are trying to build new clients in that space. Because your client is searching in the dark with different language. And I think this is true where everyone's like, my clients, she's Betty Lou, she lives in Boise, Idaho, she's got 2 dogs and a cat. And we go through this marketing avatar stuff. And marketing avatar has its place, but finding your next client, I would advocate strongly, is not it. Your next client might be Bob in Starbucks, who's in the lineup in front of you and you can hear him on the phone. But you know what his problem is, you can observe the pattern. And if you disrupt him saying, I don't want to interrupt your day, and I don't want to waste your time, but it sounds like this might be a problem, and is solving that problem curious for you? And you could find a client in a nanosecond. So this first thing I do is audit where you're going to spend time so you free up some time. Second thing I would do is say yes to leaving your house. I want you to go meet new people. I want you to ask your network, where are you currently spending time in? Where are people that are moving and not complaining? Complaint is an interesting pastime. You want to be in rooms where people are committed to solving or curious about solving or exploring solving, because you can naturally tap into moving energy. And at that point, you need to use every sense you've got to be an observer, to initiate movement.
Hmm.
Because your client is searching. Our job is to get found for them, to get connecting to them, to initiate the first steps. Because the universal truth of every adult I know is like, oh my God, I don't know how to make friends with strangers. Like, we're all scared about it, but somebody has to go first. Somebody has to initiate. I see something, I'm curious about it. Can I serve you? And it always starts in my world by auditing where you're spending time and making an intention to go explore other rooms, observe in other rooms, contribute to other rooms, and initiate the movement. And when you do that, it's amazing how many moments you're like, wow, where have you been all this time? Not in the room of
Right?
enlightenment.
Oh my God, you make it sound so simple. And I think in a way it is, but it's
Yeah.
also what I'm hearing here is like a whole nother level of intentionality. It's like
Mhm.
being really clear, like this is who I am, and this is the version of me that has like this endless flow of clients coming in. And it's not hard per se, but it is being very intentional
It's
with your
focus. It
yes.
100%. And that is where I always say to people, focus effort on the right things, which for me are these 3 non-negotiable things we talked about earlier. Create the ripples that you're looking for. Nothing else I know does. And I've created $1 billion. So just take some faith that I have evidence of a pattern that repeats. And if you wake up every day that you're working in your business and you say, my intention is to find somebody who has a pattern I can recognize, and I'm committed to being scared and still initiating in my own way that I can, I know if I show up enough with that 2-step process, it will compound. And when you're in business, it is that simple, because I am 100% sure what I'm looking for, and I'm still open-minded. I'm 100% sure I can control what I do as an activity, which is make new friends, make more offers. And I don't control what happens outside me, but I also have 100% certainty I will be here in 6 months, and I'll be here in a year, and I'll be here doing these 2 things repeatedly, because I am ready to receive you when you have gone through that journey at whatever speed you wanted, at whatever dance you wanted. And so many times now, multiple years into my business, people will come in and say, I could just hear the clarity. I want that. I said, well, clarity is achieved when we build these non-negotiables. It is when you have the courage to have somebody tell you the truth who has your 100% best interest at heart and who brings their humanity that says, your perception is that I'm this swan, got my stuff together, totally every hair in place. And I will tell you, I'm paddling hard underneath, but I know what direction to paddle.
Mm.
And I choose my speed. Some seasons are Mach 10, hair on fire, and other seasons are not. And when I have my moments and I scrape my legs or I bump into something and find an iceberg, I absolutely am human enough to leave the field, pout it out. It's not very pretty, but I also make a really clear choice in its simplicity. Tomorrow I will try again. And I will show up looking for the next person, and I will show up with the actions I can control. And I trust my expertise. I trust what I have to say will resonate with my people. And when I need to pout because it doesn't go my way, I have to remind myself there's a bigger picture I can't see. But what actions can I control?
Well said. There's so many things I could places I could take that, but I have a couple more things that I want to get to. And I would love if we could share a resource, something that our listeners today can lean into if they would like to continue to work with you.
Sure, I'd love to
Make
get
them an
some.
offer, Christine. Make them an offer.
Here's your offer, guys. Let me first ask, say, do I have your permission to make you one? And if you're thinking, I don't know where to find my next buyer, I have an awareness now I probably need to get out of my room of comfort and I need to go find strangers. You might be thinking, well, where do I start? Well, I have a resource. It's 25 ways to find your next buyer. It is filled with 25 tactics that right now I know is creating multiple six figures for someone in my network. So this tactic works. I do not want you doing 25 things. I want you to take a fresh sheet out and say, what can I commit to with simplicity? That's the strategy that feels like me, that I'm prepared to learn to get good at this skill. And you can explore the options, all 25, and find one and at most two and say, that's how I'm going to build my business, and say no to everything else. Because it's not the tactic that will solve the problem, but the tactic has to feel like oxygen for you. It has to feel a way that feels in alignment with you. It has to be something that you're going to say, I'm going to do on good days, I'm going to do on bad days, and I'm going to do it because it's worth it to me. And then I'm going to get better at that skill and put in the reps and learn from stepping stone to stepping stone to stepping stone. So there's a resource, 25 ways to find your next buyer. Download the resource and pick your lane, and then tell me, what lane did you choose? So that when I'm out in my world and you're crossing paths with me, I can cheer you on for staying in your lane, or I can remind you, what are you doing in the complications?
Perfect. We'll link that up in the show notes for you, so it's easy for you to find. I'm going to go download that. I mean, that sounds like a really hot resource. So I hope you will too. I think, getting outside of our all the time thinking, like this is our go-to, what we're doing. Like if you want to get new results, you need to be willing to do new action. So I'm going to encourage you to go get this 25 ways to find your next buyer that Christine's sharing with you, and pick a lane, share with Christine and I which lane you're going to pick, and go get into action. It's time to create some new outcomes.
Well, and I would say one thing, because I just loved it, and I want to lean on to what you just said, is you have to be willing.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing in business, laser to laser, you are the spark of your business. Melanie and myself and others that have been here on this podcast are fuel sources for you, but we're not the spark. So you have to be willing. And I had recently sent out this communication after one of my recent events. And I said, are you willing to not do this by yourself? Are you willing to do different inputs to create different outputs? Are you willing to bet on yourself? It is the lowest risk activity you have available today. And if you're not willing, I'm not here to drag you. But I am here to show you the evidence of what life could be like when you are willing. So ask yourself, am I willing? And if the answer is instinctively, heck yes, I'm scared, please start moving. Everything is solved by movement.
Amen. I love that. So I normally like to close by asking you a couple fun questions for our audience to get to know you on a different level, right? Like I think they're really getting a good sense of your expertise and the power that you bring to your coaching. But let them get to know a couple other things about you. You know, I believe that everybody on the show is a ripple maker in some way, shape, or form. That's who we serve here. That's who tends to be here on the podcast with me. I would just love it if you could claim for our community today, what's the ripple that you're leaving in the world?
I all of my life I've had one goal, and it was to build my own version of the United Nations. I
Mm,
wanted to, at the end of my days, to say I could find a great place to have a cup of coffee, buy a great book, go for a great walk, or do something in almost any part of the world. And so for me, what I show up as a human, my big ripple is a human who connects other humans to great humans. How can we support you? What resource do you need? And when you need a resource, please come find me. And as a result of that, today, I think I'm well on my way to creating that goal. It's very much a big part of who I am. I love to travel. I've lived in 5 countries, 30 cities, some more than once. And when someone says, hey, I've got an opportunity to go there, I'm like, yep, have passport, we'll travel. Who knows a great coffee shop? Who knows a great bookstore? Who knows a great place to go for a walk? And life is a great adventure when you just step into it that way.
mm, I love that. I think that's one of the things that you and I bond over is we're both really connection focused. And it's just, I don't know. It's like sometimes there's nothing to get out of it except for you just love the spark of connecting somebody to something or someone else. I mean, it's just a beautiful experience to witness the ripples being made that way.
Mhm.
All right, last question. You're looking back over your path from when you started this journey in this business. I'm imagining there was probably a pretty bold decision you had to make at some point that paid off big time, but you're really scared to make it. What would
I
that
think it
be?
was just the decision to say yes when I
Mm,
had a moment and an invitation to go start building my business. Because the precursor to that was I was on top of my corporate game, very successful as every metric had indicated. And I walked into a hotel lobby when I was 1,400 kilometers away from home, and HR and my boss were in the lobby. And I'm like, wow, I'm about to be fired. And I was, and they got on a plane and flew home. I did not. I wasn't flying home till the next day. So I spent 17 hours with my life detonated in a hotel far from home. Truthfully, spent all of it that night on the bathroom floor, crying, wondering what the hell had just happened to my life. And that moment to myself was, I will never put myself at the same level of risk, was something, the only thing I could promise myself in that moment, because everything else was uncertain. And I, when I started to rise out of that implosion in my life, I said I would be open minded. And pretty randomly, on a random Wednesday, I got a LinkedIn message from someone who I had not spoken to or had a single conversation with in 10 years. She was an office colleague that I worked with 10 years earlier in London, England. We were never social outside of a work required function. And she reached out to me and said, we haven't talked in 10 years, but you always struck me as wanting to do something for yourself in the world of business. I don't know how we went from the beauty industry to the job you have now, because we're completely honestly the opposite ends of the spectrum. But you struck me as somebody who wanted to do something. Would you have a conversation with me? And I was so fascinated that she remembered my name that, of course, I said yes to the conversation. And she offered me an opportunity to start something. And I didn't get out of bed on Wednesday to start a business. And by Friday, I could hear myself with all the really rational reasons why to say no. Like there were a lot. like everybody else. I had a lot of reasons. And I could hear myself in my brain saying it's about the money, and it really wasn't. I could hear myself saying it's really about the time. I said, you never have enough time, you create time. And the bigger thing that I was facing in my life, I was going through a very big life change. I was getting married. Everyone wanted to know if I was going to change my name. All of this was going on. I was becoming a bonus mom to 2 teenage daughters, a dog, a house, and a pretty new-ish career that I was really wobbly in because of the scars I had taken forward with me. And in a nanosecond, I thought, oh my God, I'm scared to bet on myself. And I thought, that is never who I want to be. So in a heartbeat, I sent a WhatsApp message and said, I'm in. I swan down into the kitchen. My then fiance was making coffee. And I said pretty casually, so babe, I've started a business. And he's like, I'm sorry, you did what? Like, I left you brushing your teeth upstairs. You never even told me you were considering wanting to build a business. I mean, it's not like I find that weird, but just we've never had a recent conversation about it. And we're about to be married. We should have discussions about things like this. I was about to be 40. I was getting married for the first time. I said, if there's rule books about getting married, I should probably get a copy soon. And it never occurred to me to ask your permission, opinion, because truthfully, the truest words I said was, I need to do this for me. And I need to bet on myself. And I need to do it now and every day. And it was the easiest decision I made. It was something where he's like, okay, well, let's figure it out then. But that moment of bet on yourself, you're the lowest risk you will ever take. Because no matter what decision you make, you will never have the perfect knowledge, but you can always make the decision right. And that's the commitment I stayed to myself today. What do I want? What can I control? How can I bet on myself today? And trust that if I'm still breathing, there's a reason for it.
That is a very powerful place to end today's episode. And if you're not inspired right now, I don't know what's going to move the needle for you. So if you have loved this episode, please go share it. Go connect with our amazing guest, Christine. Go grab her resource. This is going to be one of the hottest resources that you get this year. And Christine, thank you. Thank you for bringing so much power and wisdom to the Amplify community today.
Absolute pleasure. It's always lovely to share space with you.
Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.